Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you for chiming in today. Take 2 seconds, hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you're getting WIL Talk downloaded into your inbox. Every week, we send you a new podcast episode of amazing women telling their stories from around the world. And today we have a wonderful guest joining us, very multi-talented, multifaceted. Monique Hayward is joining us from Oregon. So Monique, welcome.
Hello there, Vicki. It's lovely to chat with you. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. I like your background is fascinating. And I want to give our audience just a little bit of context so they know why we're talking today. Monique is a dynamic leader with over 25 years of building successful, multifaceted career as an award-winning marketing executive, entrepreneur, author, and speaker. She has founded 3 companies and has a thriving corporate career in high technology. She's held various leadership and managerial roles at Enactify AI, Microsoft, Intel, Textronics. I was like reading this and I was like, oh my gosh, like Monique has done a little bit of everything. She's also an expert and speaker and has published 2 books and shares her knowledge very far and wide in the media and on numerous industry events. She has an incredible background in journalism, marketing, and she enjoys writing, cooking, travel, and lives in Oregon, as I mentioned, with her husband and her 16-year-old cat, Mac. So we're going to talk about Mac at some point today.
That's
So
fantastic.
Monique,
Mac is a lovely cat.
yeah, well, it sounded like it. It sounded like he's quite the feline and fur baby.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, since I don't have kids of my own, he definitely is my little fur baby.
Well, that's
I called
lovely.
him a little kitty boo this morning.
Well, I'm sure he loved that. And
Yeah.
yeah, and they just, I mean, I don't know, animals are so special. They give us the love and we give them a lot of love and yeah. Anyway, let's get into our conversation today. So, Monique, you have built this remarkable, multifaceted career. You spent lots of time in technology, corporate leader, entrepreneur, author, all of the things that you're doing. So, when you think about the span of your career, what were some of those defining moments that really shaped you as a leader today?
I think that there are maybe 3 mileposts, if you will, when I think about the long arc of my career. I think the first one is getting out of college and starting my career. My mother likes to tell me that you may have the best laid plans, but you really need to just make sure that you stay flexible because you never know what may intervene. Also, the other thing that she taught me was you got to be patient, right? Because I think a lot of times when we are at the early stages of our career, we're eager, we're excited, we want to get out there and we want to make a difference. We want to demonstrate the value that, we know that we can deliver, especially based on all the money that we paid for to get that education in the first place.
Yes, agreed.
Right. Yeah. So I think that, that early stage in my career where I was, just so eager and so excited to get going that I had to learn to slow myself down. I think that was one of the first things that was a reflection for me at that point in my career. And so I started at a company called Textronics back when I got my MBA. And I had moved from the East Coast to Oregon, and I had never been west of the Mississippi at that point in my life.
Wow. Big move.
Yeah, big move. And I had no friends, no family, no nothing out here. And it was 1994. And those of us in the audience who are old enough to remember that time, remember that it was a challenging economic time. The job market was really kind of weak. We were just coming out of the Gulf War. And, there was just all kinds of stuff going on at that time. And in fact, I had graduated from the University of Maryland 2 years prior and had gone to graduate school to hide out for a couple of years so that the job market could kind of get better. And I had this one job offer, and it was with a company that I had never heard of that was west of the Mississippi in Beaverton, Oregon. And I sure enough said Oregon because I'm from the East Coast and that's what we say.
Love it.
And I talked to my mom again, and she looked at me and she said, well, I don't hear anybody packing any bags.
Oh, well done, Mom.
No, she was like, I think that, this is this is what you got to do. Don't worry about us. We will be fine on the East Coast, and get out there and live your life and start your career. So that, I think, was the first thing, right?
Amazing.
Trust yourself, but be patient. Everything is going to work out if you take a chance and if you take a risk that deep down inside is going to pay off if you really do stick with it and do the work. So I think that was one of the first early lessons that I learned. And then I think the next one is one that I'll share with you about kind of that multifaceted nature of my career, because I had decided that about 10 years or so into my career as a marketing communications specialist and an up and coming manager and leader in high technology, and I was working at Intel at the time, I was getting a little frustrated and getting a little bored, I guess, because I had this entrepreneurial spirit that I was really trying to nurture. And that came from my grandmother. When my grandmother was still alive and still working, she was managing a dual career as well. She had a beauty salon business when she was living in New York City. That's where we're originally from.
Okay.
At night, she would work as a nurse at a psychiatric hospital in Queens. And so she would work the night shift all night long and then go home, take a nap, and then get up and drive into Midtown Manhattan from the Bronx and run her beauty shop for the day. And she did this for years and years and years. And when I would visit her over the years, my brother and I would be subjected to my grandmother's banter in the beauty shop with all of her clients. And, she would make us do work in the beauty shop. We would have to sweep up the floor and get all the hair up and do all that kind of stuff. And we hated it at the time. But then, again, as you get older and as you look back on those kinds of experiences, you're like, my grandmother was onto something here with kind of that side hustle, right? And then also, as I was thinking about, the long arc of my career, what would be my path once I actually finished my corporate career? I knew that I wasn't just going to be, retired, quote unquote. And so that's when I decided that I would pursue entrepreneurship. And I started, of all things, a restaurant business. Yeah. Now, I know. I read Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. Yeah, I know, totally. I read Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, and it's so amazing because when I look back on that experience and I look back on reading that book, he actually described the type of people who invest in restaurants or the type of people who start restaurants. And I was just right on the borderline of the type of person who should or should not start a restaurant business.
But you did.
Yeah, and I did it. And and it was successful for the first couple of years, but then the last couple of years of it were really challenging because I ran into the Great Recession and the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. But I learned a lot in that experience, Vicki, because for those of us in the audience, right, who either have had that kind of business or who know people who run those kinds of businesses, or if you're just even a patron of a restaurant, you know that they're very tough businesses.
They are.
And one of the things that it gives you is a platform to learn about every aspect of running a small business. You have to deal with leases and landlords. You have to deal with construction projects. You have to deal with customers. You have to deal with employees. You have to deal with suppliers. You have to deal with vendors. Right? It's just so much that you learn from running a restaurant business about how to operate as a small business owner. And I think that was, again, one of those defining moments in my career where I was like, wow, I can't believe that I have grown so much. And I was able to take a lot of that learning and a lot of that experience and a lot of that expertise into my corporate career. And so even though my restaurant ultimately had to close, I thrived in my corporate career as a result. And so I used those learnings and I translated that into motivation to be successful, continue to be successful in my corporate career. And so after I closed my restaurant, I actually wound up getting promoted twice at Intel. I had ascended to senior leadership at the company. I wrote my first book, and then I did a book tour, and I got on the speaking circuit. I did a whole bunch of things in that era. And then the other thing that I also picked up in that era was a really important mentor. And I think that's one of the things I want to talk with you about today is how, we as women particularly need to have those people in our corner who are helping to guide and mentor and coach us along the way. And you have to have a variety of those kind of folks who will give you good, sound, honest counsel about where you are in your career and how it is that, you're going to navigate the territory. And so I had a really good mentor at the time who continues to be someone who is special in my life, and that's Morgan Freeman. And he and I were introduced when I was at Intel. He had done an event for me, and then we struck up a relationship. And a couple of things turned out to be really cool about what happened with Morgan and me is that, first of all, I wasn't a huge Morgan Freeman fan when it came to his movies and all that stuff. Yeah, of course I followed him and, watched his movies and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't like a super fan.
Right.
But then as I was getting to know him and getting to know his background and his life story, I learned that he was an entrepreneur as well. And
Wow.
he had owned a restaurant business. And so that was one of the things that, really connected us.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was time for me to make the decision about closing my restaurant because the economic situation was so bad, and the thing about entrepreneurs too, as you know, Vicki, right, is that we're nothing if not optimistic. I mean, we think that,
totally
everything, is just around the corner. It's just around the corner, right? If you just hang in there and if you just invest and if you just focus and if you just double down, right, it's going to turn out. And Morgan was that voice that I needed to hear who said, you know what, girl, let me tell you. And he was that direct. Here is what you need to do to maintain your sanity. Here's what you need to do to get yourself back on track. Here is what you need to do to focus on where you need to be going with your life and your career. And the one thing that he said to me that has always stuck is that this particular experience is not going to define you for the long term. Do not look at it as failure. Look at it as a learning opportunity that you're going to take to that next level. And that's exactly what I did, as I described when I said I thrived in my corporate career. And then I think the third thing is at the later stage of my career now, especially in this particular environment, again, I mean, it reminds me a lot of, kind of the 90s, right? Where there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of change, a lot of transition, particularly in technology where you have, everyone's talking about, AI and the transformation that's happening in the industry around that capability in particular. You see a lot of shift. You see a lot of transition, lots of people who are getting laid off at this point. And one of the things that I think I'm learning in this lesson here is that you are in control of how you define success.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you might have spent X number of years at a company. You might have invested so much of your effort and your energy and time in that career and building that, but don't give up on yourself, right?
100%.
You have skills, you have capability, you have insight, you have expertise, you have knowledge. And a lot of times, it might just be that inflection point that you need to kind of listen to and say, at this point in my career, what is it that I really am trying to do? What is it that I really want? What is the value that I want to deliver to myself and to another organization or to my own business or my own venture? What is it that I am best suited to do right now? And don't close yourself off to any options.
Wow. So you've said a number of things that hit home with me. So when you were talking about your mom, if I go back to that conversation, just saying yes, not closing that door. I just had that conversation with my son recently. I'm like, because he's like, Mom, how did you do it? What's helped you to be successful? And I said, I just said yes. Right. I remember the first time I got promoted, I didn't even ask where I was going. We're like, I'm a Southern girl. Right. And they're like, oh, you're getting transferred to Minnesota. And I was like, where is that? I didn't even.
Where is Minnesota again? You have to go get the map.
Seriously. My dad's like, are you sure you want to do this? I was like, of course, I'm getting promoted, right? So, but I think there's a lot of power, Monique, in what you shared there, because when we get so rigid and we think things have to be this way, that's not reality, right? And when you can open yourself up to seeing and believing and taking that step, taking that risk, it doesn't mean it has to be forever, right? And so I think what you shared there is so beautiful. And look at your career, right? You've had this amazing, multifaceted career. I think the other thing you said that is really important for our audience is, even though you may be in one career, that again does not define you, and you can have other interests. You can do other things. It's a matter of what's the energy that you want to put into it, and what does that give you back in energy.
Yes. Exactly. You're absolutely right about that. And I think that one of the things that I talk to my proteges and my mentees about all the time is prioritization. And I'm sure you do too, right? We prioritize the things that are important. We always think like, oh, we don't have time. And oh, we're too busy for this or too busy for that. But a lot of what you think that you want to pursue in terms of that option that gives you more flexibility, or that option that gives you more choices to really invest in the skill set and the capability that you want to expand into a new area of expertise or a new area of focus. You have the time. You just need to sit down and figure out what your priorities are so that you can create that space. And just as important as it is to say yes, Vicki, it's also important to say no.
Yes, I
Right?
talk about that too, because
Yes.
you could burn yourself out by saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
But I think that goes back to what you just said, Monique, with the prioritizing, right? Knowing what really is most important, because you can't be everything for everyone. And as career women, there's all kinds of things that are placed on us, whether it's caring for children, caring for parents. We do a lot of unpaid, let's say, domestic work. And so that can often interfere also in our way we think about how we want to navigate life.
Yes. And, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I have just within the last couple of months experienced the caregiving aspect of aging parents. Yeah. So, with my mom is going to be 75 in December. And we just learned that she is experiencing some short-term memory issues, and they've been getting progressively worse. And I've spent, the last couple of months back and forth from Oregon to South Carolina helping her. And in fact, I was telling a friend of mine, it wasn't on my 2025 bingo card that I would have to, deal with my mom and her going through this, very tough stage of her life. Uh, it just wasn't on the bingo card, as I said. On top of everything else that happened,
Yeah.
that was not in the cards. I really am still processing, still trying to figure out how am I going to help her? Because as you said, with priorities, right? So many things now have shifted because mom went straight to the top, right? Mom went straight to the top. And you have to take some time to really think about what that means, and how that manifests itself in terms of everything else that's going on in your life, and not let it overwhelm you. And I think that's one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is, just trying to, focus on how I'm going to make that leap back into corporate America, if that's what I really want to do, or if I'm going to just continue to lean into my entrepreneurial ventures, or if I'm going to start something else that is, in that creative realm. But then, as life would happen, here comes the issues with my mom. And I'm like, okay, well, now we have to reshuffle the deck,
Yeah.
right? We have to reshuffle the deck. And what's really important now is making sure that, she gets the help and she gets the care that she needs in order for her to feel like, she's got the support from our
Well,
family
yeah. And it's also
to get through
support for
this.
you, for those that are
Yeah.
caring for her, right? Because
Yes.
like you, I'm going through the exact same thing, except my mom's a little more accelerated than your mom
Yeah.
on that particular journey. And so I'm doing the same thing. I'm back and forth from Canada to the US. I'm actually leaving this weekend, and I
Oh,
just
yeah.
came back.
I know. I just got home. I was with my mom for 2.5 weeks in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So,
And there's a lot that
yeah,
is on us. And even like if you have children, like there's so many neurodivergent issues, especially
yeah,
coming out of COVID. This generation of young people coming up, there's so much more anxiety, ADHD, OCD, like all the different things that are autism. Autism is at highest levels like ever, I think, in history. Or maybe it's
mhm.
just we now know what it is. And
Yeah, now we know,
yeah,
right, what to be looking for and
right.
get it diagnosed properly.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of these things, I didn't mean to divert us too much on that, but I think that's an important conversation as well, because so many women are prioritizing and balancing all of these things in our lives. And
Yes.
we do, everybody's heard the saying, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. And it is very true. That is a priority, making sure you're taking care of yourself. So that leads me into, like, I want to talk a little bit about trust, not just trust with our careers, but leadership, whether you're leading your life, you're leading a community, a business, like that requires a deep level of trust. And so in ourselves, in others, within systems that we work in. So how have you built or rebuilt trust throughout your life, whether that be your entrepreneurial journey, your corporate journey?
Yeah. Trust is vital to your career and your success in your career. Even in life, right? I think most relationships, let me back up. Every relationship is built around trust. And in order for you to really show up for someone else, they have to believe, I think, three things. Number one, that you say who you are and you are authentic in how you show up as who you are. Number two, you are accountable for the things that you say that you're going to do
Mhm.
and that you're going to do them. And then number three, that you are just as invested in this relationship as I am. I think that those are the three things when it comes to the foundation of trust.
Mhm.
So how I've built that is basically trying to live those three truths.
Mhm.
You
Love
can count on me to show up as who I am. You can count on me to do what I say I'm going to do. I am going to hold you accountable for being in the relationship with me in order to preserve the integrity of it.
Oh, I love that.
And there are many opportunities that you have along the way in a career to test that with people.
Mhm.
And people
100%.
will test it with you, right? And a lot of it comes down to those moments where you can stand up for somebody and speak on their behalf when they're not in the room. If I can trust you to do that for me, that's powerful. If I am in a crisis and I really need your advice and counsel, or I need your help in some material kind of way, can I call you? Right? There's
Yes.
a lot of trust associated with that. Also, the flip side of that one is don't call me just when you're in trouble.
Yes. That's a
Right?
good one.
Yeah. Can you please maintain a relationship with me that is mutually beneficial, where we are both looking out for each other's interests, where we're both invested in each other's success,
Mhm.
but don't always call me when it's a crisis. Please
Mhm.
don't do that. Maintain the relationship. That's a huge part of the trust building exercise.
100%. So I want to go into that just a little bit more
Yeah, girl, get into it. Let's do it.
because I see that too. And sometimes what baffles me is that people don't even realize they do that.
They don't realize it at all.
And
It's
but it's like, how do you have that much or that lack of self-awareness that you only reach out to Monique or to Vicki when there's a problem or you need help instead of having a regular ongoing relationship? Because you're right, that builds trust, that consistency of, it doesn't mean sometimes it's just checking in. Monique, how are you?
yeah.
How's your life going?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think that the other thing too that will help with that is that you have to narrow the field a little bit. I think what social media has done for us, for better or for worse, is expanded our connections.
Mhm.
But I also think it's created this false sense of, kind of this false sense of connectedness that doesn't really exist, right? You might have, 500 plus followers or whatever on LinkedIn, but they're really only about the handful, like the 30 to 50 who really matter, right? And if you're not invested in those relationships and you're not invested in those opportunities to build connections and build trust with those people, then you're missing out. And like you said, then you wind up with a situation where you're only calling upon people when there is a crisis or there is something that you need that in the moment is urgent
Mhm.
or necessary for you to get over a situation that is potentially detrimental to yourself or to your career. Nobody wants to hear from you only when things are not going well.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're calling and saying, "Hey Monique, can you connect me with this person?" And
Yeah.
it's like, "Okay, I haven't heard from you in 24 months." All of a sudden you're showing up on my doorstep. So why do you want to connect with this person? Like, I just find it fascinating that people don't realize it. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just a lack of awareness that.
Yeah, I believe you too. I think it's not intentional at all. I think that people just get on with their lives, or they're managing their careers in a way that is not purposeful, right? It's not purposeful. They're just kind of going along. And then it's like, oh, wow, this is something that I really should be paying attention to. And I need the help here. And yes, I haven't really invested.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's worth the investment,
It is. It's
right?
worth the investment. Now, in fact, it's so funny. One of my former employees from Microsoft earlier this year had gotten twisted up in some of the corporate actions at the company, and I hadn't heard from him in several months actually after I had left the company. The very first thing he did when he called me up, he was like, "I am so sorry that I have not called you since you left. Now I really need your help." So if you're going to open up with an apology,
It goes a long way.
yeah, again, because like you said, the self-awareness, right? He knew that, he should have reached out before he got in trouble,
Right.
right? But
Right.
then when he got in trouble, it was like, okay, now we've got to, we got to strap in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now we got to work it out. And success story here, right? We worked together. I coached him, mentored him, helped him open up some doors. And then eventually he wound up getting to the next opportunities.
Fantastic.
So you can recover.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's not all lost. There is a way that you can, reintroduce yourself, kind of fall on the sword a little bit, and then engage. But certainly as a matter of common practice, stay in touch with people,
Yeah. Like,
especially people who are, in your network, who can really help you get to that next opportunity that you're looking for in your career and in the things that you're pursuing.
yeah. Yeah. Cause you just don't know. You don't know where that next connection is going to come from. Wow. I love that. And I'm glad we went there because I think that's a really important conversation to have with our audience that's listening is like, who in your network that you haven't reached out to in a while and why, right? And take a moment. And even if it's just a quick email to say, hey, had you on my mind, or hey, I was listening to the WIL Talk podcast and it reminded me I needed to check in with you. And so I just want to see how you're doing, right?
Yes,
Doesn't take
absolutely.
a lot of time. It's just just that little note to let also somebody know you're thinking of them, which I think is huge.
Yeah, people like that. I love it. In fact, one of my former colleagues at Intel just reached out to me recently because she's down the path of, I think, starting her own business and wanting to reach out across her network. And she and I hadn't talked in, gosh, probably 10 or 15 years. And
Wow.
she reached out and she was like, hey, I've been following you. This is, hey, this is what I'm up to. I'd love to, have a coffee chat or whatever. Like, just, yeah. I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't have to be hard.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So if you're sitting on the fence and you're a little bit worried about should I not? I would say yes, you should.
Yes, you
Take
should
that
take the
leap.
risk.
Yeah, take the
Yeah,
risk.
take the risk. I mean, the downside is what? Somebody might ignore the mail. Yeah. Then they weren't worthy of being in the network in the first place.
That's right. That's right. And don't take it personal. And people are
Yes,
busy.
and don't take it personally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it take a little while, but eventually they may see it and then connect back with you.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
Monique, talk to us. You've published 2 books, right? So, what was the impetus that brought you to wanting to share your experiences, your stories with the world?
Well, my first book is called Divas Doing Business: What the Guidebooks Don't Tell You About Being a Woman Entrepreneur. And I think that probably sums up the motivation right there.
Yes,
Yeah, so it was born out of my experience with starting my first business, like I said, which was a restaurant business. And in fact, Morgan Freeman wrote the foreword to my book.
he's still
Yeah, so that
Morgan.
was fun. Yeah, it was awesome. And so I was on a journey trying to just figure out the best practices for women starting their own businesses. And at the time, there just wasn't a lot that was being written. There wasn't a lot that was being talked about. It was certainly a struggle. We have issues and challenges when it comes to accessing networks, accessing capital, accessing the knowledge and the expertise to be able to do these things. I mean, I came out of Case Western Reserve University with this fantastic MBA, and I still didn't know, everything that I needed to know. And so since I couldn't find a lot of those resources, I decided that, I'll just put together a book myself.
Love that.
And and so I wrote the book. And what was cool about that was that I didn't just rely on my own stories and my own expertise and my own experience, I actually reached out to 10 other women about their experiences for each chapter that I wrote in the book. So for the particular subject that each chapter covered, I talked to another woman in business, another entrepreneur, for her perspective in kind of a Q&A format. So that was really fun. My second book came a few years later, and it's called Get Your Hustle On. It's not just about a job, but building a rewarding career. And that was born out of my corporate career, where I was ascending through the ranks of leadership. And as a marketing executive and as an African American woman, a lot of people were seeking me out because I wound up being one of the few or the only in a lot of situations. And I found myself giving a lot of the same advice and a lot of the same counsel over and over again. And I said, I should probably put this in a book. And so
Love how that
I wrote
comes
a book.
together.
And with that, the framework that I came up with is called the 5 C's.
Okay.
And so the first C is the foundation, and that is competence. If you have nothing else in this world, you have your skills, your experience, your expertise, everything that you know inside your head. And oh, by the way, these days, AI cannot take away what's inside your head. So we can talk about that in a bit. But at the end of the day, you build a career around competence. That's the foundation. The other 4 C's, if you will, are the planks that you build on top of that foundation. So the first one is cachet. That's your personal brand, right? So who are you? Why should anybody care? And what are your values? What is it that you stand for, right? So that's the first one. The second one is communication. That's what you and I are doing right now. That's your storytelling. Right? A lot of people really do need to understand how to put together a story about what it is that they do, who they are, why should anybody care, and what is the value that you are delivering in an organization. It's all about the storytelling. And I talk all the time about influencing through storytelling, building networks through storytelling, advancing your career through storytelling. I'm a broken record when it comes to storytelling. So that's communication. The next one is connections. That is your network. We were just talking about how important it is for you to continue to nurture your network and understand who are the people who can help you get your job done, and who are the people who are your trusted connections who are working with you on the various aspects of your career. And then that leads me to the final C, which is coaches. So those are your mentors, your role models, your sponsors. Those are the people who are really sitting down with you and telling you like it is. When your stuff is janky and when it ain't working, you need those people to come in and say, hey, Monique, you might want to straighten this up here. Hey, this is the meeting. These are the people who call you when the meeting is done. It's the meeting after the meeting. They take you into the other conference room, or they call you on the phone and say, okay, here's what you did that was really great in that presentation. You nailed these points. You did this amazingly. You connected with this person. You got this point across. But here are the 3 things that I think that, you make it even better. Here's where you can improve. Here's where you can show up a little bit better. Here are the 3 people who you need to call so that, you make sure that you've got those bases covered next time, right? Nice. You need those people in your circle who can give you honest and direct feedback about where you are in your career. So that's the 5 P's, and that's how you get your hustle on.
Love it. Love it. That's awesome. And so how do you see that that voice of a leader and your confidence has impacted your own storytelling?
I think that I start with authenticity. I try to be who I am and nobody else. In fact, it's so funny because years ago, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I used to be a commercial model, and I went to acting classes, and it was really funny for me, Vicki, because I learned that I am a terrible actress. I cannot be anybody other than me, and so my big claim to fame as a commercial model was a piece that I did, a campaign for the WIL back in the day. And I was playing myself. I was playing a professional woman who was making donations at a Goodwill. Really? Like, yes, I could do that. But if I had to be somebody else, like, oh God, it was awful. I could not do it. I think authenticity is how I show up as a leader. The other thing that really, I think, characterizes my leadership is that I am open, I am direct, and I am honest with people about where I'm coming from and what I'm observing. I think having a journalism background, I have learned how to be a participant observer. and
Not an easy role.
a unique lens through which to see the world, right? And I can, very quickly assess for people who are interested in having that conversation about, kind of where their strengths and weaknesses are, where their pain points are, where are opportunities for them to improve. So I've developed some coaching skills over the years that I think have made me a really good leader. And then I think the other thing too, again, goes back to the conversation that we had about trust, right? You come into my circle, it's a circle of trust, right? You can be yourself, you can say what you need to say, you say it in this circle, it doesn't leave, right? It's a little bit of Vegas rules.
Yes, yes.
And because people need that safe space, especially women. We need that safe space in order to work through some things. A lot of times we're just working through some issues. You've got, excuse my French, you got a jackass who you're trying to deal with at work, right? How am I navigating this today? Why is he, what? And it's usually a he. Why is he acting like he doesn't have good sense today? How am I?
Yeah.
How am I going to work on this today? Right? Or it could be a woman too, but most times.
That's a great point that you bring up. And interestingly, I had a group of people last night and this conversation about trust came up, and it was a mixed group of men and women. And surprisingly, the men were equally as excited to have the conversation. And their feedback was, and I'm validating what you just said, Monique, because they said, we don't know each other, but we know Vicki and we trust Vicki. So therefore we're trusting you.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And the conversation literally, I mean, we went super deep into power and trust and the dynamics that all of us navigate, whether it's personally or professionally. But to your point, having that circle, having those people or that person who shows up authentically, who will give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, that is a precious gift to have. And we don't take that lightly, right? Like, I mean, we build our credibility on that. And so that reputational trust becomes amplified because you're touching so many people's lives when you do that. And you also expect that they honor and do the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you want those relationships to be, definitely bi-directional.
Yeah, love that. So, Monique, I don't want our conversation to end.
I know, but it must come to an end
It
at some
must come
point.
to an end.
Otherwise, we'll be here for the next few hours and people will be like,
Exactly.
you know what, girls, wrap it up.
I know our audience is going to say, okay, I'm finished walking the dog. But I do want to talk about Mac. Like, tell us about your 16.
Oh my goodness, my 16-year-old cat, Mac. So I have had him since I closed my restaurant business. So my husband and I've always been cat people. And we went through a period where, our little babies were all gone. And we decided that we were going to be kind of cat free for a while. But then as I was going through the experience of, winding down my restaurant business and, thinking about where I was going to go with my corporate career, I decided that, it was time for us to have cats again. And so I went to the animal shelter here in my local town, and I found Mac. I found him first. And he was a kitten at the time, and he was just so cute in his little kennel, just kind of rolling on his back and kind of flopping like please take me home. And I was like, okay, fine, he's definitely coming. But then on the way out, there was another little kitten who was with his brothers and sisters, and he was actually crawling up the kennel and meow meow meow, and I was like, oh, I got to take him too. And so we named him Chase. So Mac and Chase, they were brothers from another mother. and so we got them when they were kittens, and unfortunately we lost Chase during the pandemic. He wound up with, oh my goodness, like this kitty heart attack kind of thing. Like, he was alive on Friday and gone on Monday. It was the weirdest thing. And so we lost him when he was 11 years old. So that was, a few years back now. But Mac is still with us, and he's going to be 17 in the springtime. We figure his birthday's around March. That's my birthday. So we kind of like,
We can celebrate
line up
together.
his birthday with mine.
Well, what do you think Mac has taught you about leadership and life?
Oh my gosh. What my cat has taught me about leadership is that you can have your own swagger and everybody will notice. You can show up in the room and you can own it.
I love it.
And you can be vocal about what it is that you need, but you can also be kind and generous with the love that you give back to people. So I think that's what he's taught me about leadership and
Amazing.
about life. He teaches me, like we said, earlier, about having pets in general, right? That they just are. It's so much unconditional love. It is. It's amazing. I mean, when I lost Chase, I was heartbroken for days, and I think about him every day. And I've got pictures of him all around him here in my office, and I'm just like, oh, I love him and I miss him.
Aw.
So. But we still have Mac, and hopefully we'll have him. My goal is for him to get to 20 years. If he can get to 20 years, that would be awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, they have a special place in our hearts for sure.
Yes.
I see that. Look, my mom has a cat, and I see the compassion and the love and I think it's because she's on her own and she has dementia, and he's such a force for her. And so I think we do have to recognize it's beyond four little legs, and right, like they're certainly hold special places in our hearts.
Absolutely.
Well, Monique, this has been amazing. If people have questions for you, they want to talk about getting your hustle on, how do they do you?
They can find me everywhere, Vicki. I am trying to be famous. So
no, you're not trying. You are.
I have my own website, so that's moniquehayward.com. And then you can link off from there. So you can get all my socials from there. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can hit me up on Instagram, on Facebook, X, Blue Sky.
Wow.
Who else? Everybody. YouTube.
She's everywhere.
Everybody. I'm everywhere. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your time with us and your story of, what all you've accomplished. And I know our audience is going to take some really good nuggets from this conversation about how you can be multifaceted and tick off a lot of things that are important to you so that energetically we're filling our cup. So thank you for this beautiful conversation.
You're welcome. And thank you again for having me on.
My pleasure.
Women in Leadership.
Yeah. That's right. Let's go, ladies. And audience, thank you for chiming in. We know you have a choice. If this episode resonates with you, please do share it with a woman in your life that needs to hear this. And listen, we can do a lot of things in this world. So let's go for it. I want to thank everybody. And listen, if you are interested in finding out more about your own leadership, go on to visit Women in Leadership Empowered. That's 1L, Women in Leadership Empowered, and take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you a lot of insight as to how you're showing up in the world. So we thank you, and we'll see you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Take care, everyone. Monique, happy holidays. We'll see you again soon.
Happy holidays.
Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.